Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode in this series as we celebrate the life of Master Sergeant Gregory Trent. Today we have, just another awesome human being here from 3424, Dovid Berg, who was on that team, was intimately involved in that entire incident. Before we dive kind of into who you are and to this story, I just wanted to personally thank you. Thank you for making this trip. Thank you for rearranging your schedule, and thank you for having the courage to get in front of a camera and really talk about one of the worst days in your life, man. So that's not lost on me and my team, and I just wanted from the bottom of my heart to thank you for being a part of this project.
Yeah, no worries. For me, I always think about my time in Special Forces as the greatest adventure of my life. And the people that I worked with and that I was surrounded with are the people that made me into who I am today. Yeah. And so any way to give back or to make sure that those stories and those legacies continue on is a very important thing to me.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that. One of the things that I had talked about, with Dave, the team captain, is just, what a group of Avengers you guys were, and how, you guys came from all these different walks in life, and, all these, lives previous to being Green Berets, and like how all these skill sets combined into this like group of superhumans as you guys deployed to Afghanistan. Before we kind of dive into that, can you just give the listeners just a little bit of background, kind of about, your life and, kind of what led you up into that point where you get on that deployment?
Yeah, so, it all starts with, it's my family business. I'm a fourth generation U.S. Army soldier. My son's a fifth generation U.S. Army soldier. My family's fought in every conflict since World War II. And so for my whole life, I knew that I was going to ultimately become a soldier. When I got out of high school, I initially made a hard left instead of that and ended up joining the Air Force, which was a great opportunity. I was an F-16 crew chief, like a mechanic on aircraft, and it really gave me an opportunity to learn about what hard work was and really what the thought process of a mission-first mentality was. Though it wasn't, the greatest love of my life at that time, and I realized at the end of my enlistment that it was time to move on and do something different. So at that moment, I decided to go completely out of the military into a different realm of the world, and I got into the high-end wine business, the luxury wine business. I became one of about 187 advanced sommeliers in the world. I ran one of the largest wine programs in the United States, and I did that for about 5 years and just really enjoyed myself. There was a lot of interacting with people, but I have an older brother that's a Green Beret, and he would be telling me about the invasion into Iraq, the initial push into Afghanistan. All of this was going on in this time. And I still always had this desire to give back, to give more to our country. And so one day I came home and told my wife, hey, I think I'm going to put my career on hold and I'm going to go join the Army and become a Green Beret. And I'm very fortunate that she said, hey, I'll follow you anywhere in the world. And really, that's how we started onto this new adventure of our lives. And so we got out here to brag, got going, went into the Q course, just, did what I had to do to be the best that I could be. Finally got through and made it to 3424. And that was the right place at the right time for me.
That's awesome. So kind of take us back to, when you first got on this team, right? You've got, you got some life experience. You've already, been in the Air Force. You worked in this pretty luxurious industry. And so you have all these different life experience. Your brother's a Green Beret. Was that your first team?
Yeah. So it was my first team, and I'll never forget that day one, my team sergeant told me to not open my mouth at all for the next year unless somebody talks to me. So for the most part, maybe not for a year, but for a few months, I tried to definitely just be the humble guy, be a sponge, listen and learn. And that's how I started to really get to know all of my teammates. And for me, relationships is always a very important thing. I think that is probably the one thing that makes SF teams so special, is this tight bond relationships that we have with each other, and for the fact that most of us are a little bit older. If you look at a SEAL platoon, those guys are usually a little bit younger in their 20s, so those relationships are different. Think about the relationships you have with your boys in your 20s compared to the relationships, more meaningful relationships you have with people in your 30s. And those relationships that we have on a team are what drives you to do the things you do when shit goes wrong.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the greatest parts I noticed, is our team just had a really good dynamic. We had a couple guys, ones or twos, that maybe didn't fit the full round, but 10 of 12 guys loved to hang out, clicked, would be there for each other, would do anything we could for anybody at any time. And really, those relationships is what got us through those missions and why we're still so close today.
This episode is brought to you by TitansArms.com, your trusted source for research-grade SARMs. These third-party tested compounds are formulated to support research into tissue-selective activity, especially in muscle and bone. Titan offers free nationwide shipping, a wide selection in both capsules and droppers, and oversized 90 capsule and 90 ml bottles. Everything is compounded in the USA, raising the bar for quality and reliability. From the lab to your door, Titan delivers transparent data and premium service. That's TitansArms.com, forged by research, not opinions. That's awesome, dude. How did it feel to finally be a part of this brotherhood that you've dreamed of for a while, and also knowing that your brother's already a Green Beret?
Yeah, it was very important to me to make sure that I, really established myself correctly into this situation. The biggest advice my brother gave me coming into SF was, it's a very small world and your reputation will precede you. And that's true. I mean, there's never been a deployment, a school, anything, a trip that I haven't gone on that I didn't know somebody or knew somebody that knew me through somebody else. So it is a small community. And so because of that, you're driven every day to be your best because you're surrounded by such great people. We forget about it because it becomes our norm. And then you step out of that team room into the real world and you're like, oh, I forgot. 50% of the world is actually dumb because we don't get to see that. We have all these high performers. We have these guys that you just have to give intent to and they can execute. You don't need to tell them how to do it. They will find the way. And so it was the probably one of the greatest feelings of my life, finally getting onto a team and just getting together with the guys and ultimately getting down range and just building that family that we had.
Awesome, man. Thanks for that. That description. It's very, very unique. You spent 2 years training with the team before deploying in 2012. A rare slow burn for a Green Beret. How did those years shape your bond with Master Sergeant Gregory Trent, especially since he was your senior echo before becoming the Team 18 Fox?
Yeah, it was a unique time because we were standing up new battalions and we didn't have a mission set initially. So we were actually all spread to the wind for about the first year. So there wasn't a lot of inter-team dynamic at that time. There wasn't a lot of that relationship building really happening because everybody was at individual schools. But after that end of that year, going into that second year is when we started getting that team collective training going on and just started building these deep, amazing relationships. And that's where you started to see those guys on your team that are the ones that they're special. They're special from the place of like, they're smart, they're personable, they're the guy that can truly mentor you. And that was what Greg was. It wasn't that Greg was the most technically proficient guy or the most knowledgeable on one of these things, but he was smart, he knew what he was talking about, he was approachable, and he knew how to get it through to you. And that's what really drove me to trying to stay close to Greg. And I was fortunate that because I was the only commo guy on the team, and that was Greg's previous role, that I was able to get mentorship from him and, a little bit of a calming mentorship because Greg's personality was just very jovial, very easygoing. And so it was like when things start getting crazy, he'd be able to be like, yeah, man, it's not a big deal. We just got to do these 3 things and we can move on. And it's like,
yeah. What was it like to have that mentorship? What did that mean to you?
It meant everything to me because as a brand new guy, I didn't know what I was doing. I think we always say it's something like 50% of what you need to know how to do. 50% of what you need you only learn 50% of your job in the Q course. The other 50% you have to learn, getting out on the ground and doing it. So when you show up, you don't really know how to do your job. And you need that guy that's able to say like, no, I know the book says this, but this is how it is actually done. And so it is such a huge priority because that's how we get good. Cross-training and mentorship.
Yeah. Greg was the guy with the cigarette dangling in his mouth, blasting Britney Spears, always steady. What's the first memory that pops into your head when you think of him from those early days on the team?
Greg was just always the happy guy. He was the guy that when the team was having some rough times, you could look to him and he would just crack a joke or crack a smile or spike his hair straight up and just, bring everybody back down to a happier place. And I think that was so important because we did have a very young team at the time. And a lot of guys, even myself, would be nervous, never been on an SF deployment previously. And to have a little bit of that calming down from somebody is very important.
I can definitely understand that. When you first joined ODA 3424, what were your initial impressions of Greg Trent, and how did your relationship evolve over time?
I thought he was the old man. I remember looking at Greg like, oh man, this is the old dude, a fox. He's got to have been around here forever, but quiet, reserved. But just when he would just drop those one-liners in there, joke in there, and it was somebody that I instantly looked up to.
That's awesome. What unique role or energy did Greg bring to the team dynamic? And can you describe a moment where you particularly felt his leadership or presence strongly?
Yeah, I would say the thing that he did the best was sort of help bring the team together. That's part of the role of the Fox. So you have your team leader whose true job is supposed to be running the mission. That's what's important, mission, mission, mission. You have your team sergeant who's supposed to be about the guys and making sure the guys are taken care of and prepared. And then you have this next leadership role as the Fox. That's like the intermediary or what like a lot of times we would call the shadow governor. And so he's the guy that he's part of the leadership team, but he's not fully part of the leadership team. So thus he's still part of the boys. And so then the boys can come to him and be like, this is what's going on, man. We're pissed off about this. We don't like this. And then he can take that to the leadership and sort of influence them.
Can you tell the listeners who may not understand, who may not have like an Army background, exactly kind of what an 18 Fox is and what they do?
Yeah. So on a Special Forces operational detachment, this is a 12-man team. You have a team leader who's in charge of leading the team. You have a warrant officer who's the second in charge and as well as really focuses on long-term training, planning, and then intelligence operations. Below them, the third member of the leadership is the 18 Fox or the intelligence sergeant. He is also the assistant to the operations sergeant, so the highest ranking non-commissioned officer. And so if you're going to be in a split team, typically you have the Fox on one team, the team sergeant on the other team, the captain on one, and then the warrant on the other. The main job of the 18 Fox is to be the guy that is he collects and analyzes all of the intelligence that's going on, leads all targeting, and then also plays the bad guy. So when we start going into mission planning as the 18 Fox, you are the expert on what the enemy is going to do. And so as we start doing mission planning, he's the guy to say, oh, hey, we're going to go left here. And he's going to go, oh, yeah, but by the way, the enemy does this and they're going to kill you there. Okay, cool. Now we're going to go right. Okay, but if you go right, you have to understand this. So it's sort of that red team function. Mm-hmm. But really, the more important function that's not on the books is that intermediary between the team and between the leadership. And that's where I think Greg excelled the most.
Awesome explanation. Thank you for that, Dovid. Could you walk me through your emotions and mindset as you deployed to Afghanistan with ODA 3424, knowing the seriousness and the risks that were involved?
Yeah, it was my first combat deployment, so it was a little bit scary. Not knowing exactly what we were going to getting into. The fight was going on pretty heavy and hot and heavy where we were at. So we had a great team that was well trained, but we had a lot of pieces that were coming in late to the deployment cycle. So some new folks, there were some interpersonal issues going on. So as a new guy, it was a little bit nerve-wracking. I remember our final pre-mission training right before we left for Afghanistan. We almost had like a coup happen in a training event because the team sergeant wanted to do something, the rest of the team wanted to do something else, and there was a lot of this, sort of animosity that started it out. And then as a new guy, you're like, what is going on? Like, I see the E7 over here telling the E9, like, we ain't doing that. How does that work? And I don't want to know if I want to be the guy in the middle of that.
I don't like it when mommy and daddy fight, man.
Yeah, exactly. No. But we were able to get through it all. Ultimately, like, I felt that we are great tactically. We were proficient in everything we needed to do to be able to accomplish the missions, and that we'd be able to work the rest of it out on the ground.
I know, Greg, pre-deployment was pretty crucial and kind of doing the intelligence preparation of the battlefield and getting the team prep. I think you guys were 2 weeks out, and you guys find you're going to a completely different area than you originally planned, and it was an area that Greg had gone before, and had seen some pretty tough combat. Do you remember being a part of that conversation or that coming up in the team dynamic, and how did you feel about that?
Yeah, honestly, I was such a new guy, and I was so focused on just getting my work done. I think those conversations were going on above me.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, you weren't really aware that there'd been a change. I guess you were just.
I knew that there was been a change, but it was like, okay, hey, are your radios good? I was focused on my job. I had to have faith that the leadership was running that thing, giving me the information that I need to make sure that I can work on what I needed to work on. So just because of the fact that I was new and we were short in echo, I think really for me it was just, hey, focus on tactical, what we need to do tactically to get ourselves prepared to go wherever we go.
Yeah, I think that's one great thing that we're getting in this story is really this 360 view of the whole story, right? Because I think, everybody, not only just from what happened with Greg, but just on a deployment in general, like all the different ideas and the different, viewpoints that everyone has. You guys all might be doing the same thing, headed to the same place, but everybody has a different piece of that puzzle, and it's good as you guys, both drop puzzle pieces to give us that overall and to give our listeners that overall picture of what goes on. It's super helpful. January 2012 hits, and you're finally in Afghanistan after years of prep, hungry to get into the fight. What was the vibe on ODA 3424 as you rolled into split team setup with you and Mike and Sanawan and Greg and Dave and Parmacon?
Excitement. The team has got that. You always, when you first get on the ground, you're excited. You're ready to get after it. We had young guys on the team who were super motivated to really get after it. They want to get out there and kill the enemies of America. So it was a lot of excitement and ready to go. We show up on the ground and we quickly realize it's a lot slower than we thought it was going to be. And so there's like getting into that realistic routine of combat of, 90% of the time it's administrative BS, the most boring shit you'd ever do in your life. But then 10% of the time it's the greatest adventure of your life, and oh my goodness. So sort of figuring that out, I think, took us a little bit. And then every team has a different personality, and not only personality, but an operational personality. And the team that we ripped out with, they were a very different team than we were. They were not a very aggressive team. They were really more focused on their bases, and so they weren't getting out and really finding out what was going on. And so when we arrived, they said, hey, this is a pretty much semi-permissive environment. Everything's happy. Everybody's happy here. So we were like, oh, okay. Well, 3 weeks later, we quickly realized, no, if you go up there and you take some sticks and hit some beehives, it's not very nice around here. And so at that point is when we realized, okay, this is going to be a different trip than we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and I think when you guys got on there too, it was still the winter, right? Which typically, is there's not a lot going on, and then once the winter starts melting off, then it's that's what they call in Afghanistan the fighting season. So I think you guys got there kind of dead in the winter almost, coming on the backside of winter, and then as the
grass grows high, where they can hide, that's when the fighting starts.
What was the atmosphere like within your team as you started your missions in Afghanistan, especially given that many of you were eager to engage after extended preparations without deployments?
Everybody was very eager, but then there was some disruption at the beginning because we had some issues on the team. We had a loss of a guy that had to leave the team because he made some poor decisions. And that's when we brought Carl in as the team sergeant. So we had a little bit of early team dynamics that had to get worked out, which I think we were able to, that happened so early in the trip. I think it was probably the best case scenario. So within a week or two, that was cleaned up. Everybody now knew their new roles and what was going to be going on. And then really, guys just wanted to get after it. Guys wanted, and Dave, I'll give it to Dave. Dave really wanted to get after it. And we were running 4 missions a day between the split teams. We were doubling mission output of any other team in our AO, and we were just on it, driving, going, meeting with our ALP, building ALP, bringing in Afghan Special Forces, like doing everything we can and keeping ourselves busy. We didn't take days off, and like I said, most days was at least 2 to 4 missions a day, and So that just became the battle rhythm of life.
Yeah. What was the mission? Like, what was it that you guys doing within, with whatever you can tell us?
So the overall mission that we were doing was called Village Stability Operations. And what we were doing is we were out in a village, far away from any other U.S. force. There, we brought in local Afghans that wanted to sort of help the security situation. We established the Afghan local police system. We built police stations for them, trained them, training pipelines, supported them. And then after they were up and running, then we would gather all the intelligence. We would pass intelligence to them. And then we would either, sort of advise, assist, or accompany them. Back then, mostly all accompany them forward to execute missions against the Taliban.
Hey everyone, we are excited to announce our new partnership with an awesome sponsor. When it's time to fuel my training, Alpha Country Training and Nutrition is my go-to. Founded by former Green Beret Spencer Lewis, Alpha Country crafts elite supplements to power warriors and athletes through the toughest challenges. They've got clean, effective supplements for endurance, strength, and recovery, plus apparel that actually performs. Whether you're grinding out early mornings or long miles, Alpha Country helps fuel that mission. One of their flagship products, Stay Ready Endurance, is a game changer, packed with cluster dextrin and mod carb, a premium, fast-acting, and slow-releasing carbohydrate source that keeps you fueled throughout your duration of your training. It's packed with blueberry and goji berry powders for natural antitoxin protection, has a full multivitamin blend inside, and also has electrolyte support through Himalayan pink salt and potassium. Clean, easy to digest, no bloating or heavy sugar crash that keeps you hydrated and energized during grueling workouts. Whether you're rucking in the heat, crushing high-intensity workouts, or training for Special Forces selection, this intra-workout formula prevents fatigue and keeps you in the fight. Every ingredient is hand-selected for maximum performance because Spencer learned in the field, generic supplements just don't cut it. Alpha Country's entire line is built on transparency and quality, helping you recover faster and train harder. Ready to lead by example? Go to thealphacountry.com and use Vanguard 20 for 20% off your first order. That's thealphacountry.com, code Vanguard 20 for 20% off your first order. Power up and stay fueled with Alpha Country. Your body, your community, and your country deserve it. Awesome. You've said, Greg tempered your eagerness kind of as a new guy, telling you not to pick fights just for the sake of it. Can you recall a specific moment early in that deployment where he pulled you aside and either set you straight or talk to you, and how did that stick with you?
Yeah, we had gotten a call that some of our partner force was in a gunfight. So we were jumping up on the trucks and I'm getting all my stuff ready and I'm actually going to be in the truck with Greg that day, and I'm so excited. I'm like, first time I'm going to go out, I'm going to go get my combat actions, my infantryman's badge, because I'm going to shoot some bad guys today. I'm so excited. And he's like, hey man, I just want you to understand that this is like a two-way street. We don't want to get into a fight unless we have to get into a fight. Because when you're in a fight, bad shit can happen to us too. And he said that to me and I was just like, yeah, I hear you, but I'm not there yet. And honestly, I don't think I was there until Greg got shot. It's just one of those things as a young Green Beret, you spent your whole life training to run to gunfight, that you want to run to gunfight and you're fearless of it. And you feel that your training has gotten you to a place where you're invincible and you're not scared. And because of that, sometimes you make bad decisions. You push yourself farther than you need to push yourself. And I think that's really what Greg was trying to push and teach me was there's a time and place. Don't go out. If the odds aren't in our favor and we don't need to do it, then we probably shouldn't do it. If the odds are in our favor and we need to do it, then we're going to go do it. And it was something that I took in from him later on, and then I can remember follow-on trips. Now me being the old 18 Fox with my cigarette in my mouth and all the guys looking at me, and I'm like, we don't need to go out and try to run in every gunfight, guys.
Yeah, it's funny how that life stuff comes full circle sometimes. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. The team's first real firefight came months in, a near ambush, and you guys were in your LTA TVs. You guys were caught. I think you were talking about you got out of the car, and I think you guys were doing something. You didn't even have your rifle. I think when the when it cooked off. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so we were going out that day to visit a few of our local police stations. And we had like 5 LT ATVs, so maybe 10 cats, 8 Green Berets, 2 civil affairs.
Will you tell everybody what an LT ATV is?
Razor, like Polaris Razor, just a military Polaris Razor.
Like no armor?
A straight up Polaris Razor that's been painted brown. And these were the old ones, so that's literally what they were, like off the shelf razors just painted brown. Now we have a purposely built light terrain, all-terrain vehicle. But yeah, no armor, no nothing on these things. So we're running around throughout the day. We're going to different checkpoints. We're meeting with them, checking on all of them. And on our way back, we just randomly decided to take a completely different route and like dive into this riverbank. And so we just pop into this riverbank. We pop out of the riverbank. We come around the other side, and we're driving through a wheat field. And Mike, man, Mike has the eyes of a god when it comes to finding IEDs. All the time when we'd be in Afghanistan, we'd be driving and he'd be like, oh, there's an IED up there. And we'd be like, whatever, dude. You'd pull up, yep, there's an IED there. Oh, there's an IED over there. Whatever, dude. Yep. So the same thing. This day we're cruising along and he's like, oh, there's an IED crossing the road up there. So we're looking around, like they had no way of knowing we were gonna come there, because it's not like a lot of times we would drive a route that we had to take back. They'd put an IED in because they knew we had to come back. This was total chance. And so we set a perimeter. He's gonna go up there and blow it in place and get rid of it. And me and one of the other guys, Cray, are just, because it had been very quiet at this point, we're just walking around. We get out of our LT ATVs, rifle sitting in the truck, didn't even pick it up. Him and I are just walking around, and finally him and I are like, where would I be? Like, the guy that's gonna set this off, where would I be? And he's like, I think I'd be in that building. I'm like, all right, let's go walk over there. So we just start walking over there. We get about 10 feet from that building, and all of a sudden, gunfire erupts all around us. Near ambush. What it was they didn't have any idea that we were gonna be there, but we got there. We took so much time because we also, when we went to blow up the IED, the blasting cap was bad. So it was a low det. And so we had to go set all of it up again. So we ended up being there, instead of for maybe 5 minutes, we were there for like 25 minutes, which then gave them a chance to get in and come surround us. So at that point, near ambush kicks off. Cray and I are trying to return fire with our pistols and break contact with our pistols back to the LT ATVs. I get back to the LT ATVs. I get back to mine. Craig goes back to his. I have a interpreter with me. I'm dead center of the kill box. And just start going to work. My rifle goes down, like catastrophic failure of my rifle. So now I'm behind the LT ATV, trying to get my rifle back up and working. I finally get to the point where I realize that's not happening. We had a couple SMADs, which are like an anti-tank rockets. So I just grabbed those and started shooting those back into the compound. And then at one point, I'm just really telling my terp where to go. But I just got sucked into staying there, which is the stupidest thing possible, because I'm dead center of the ambush site. And then, thank God, man, Dave came back into the ambush site to come get me. You know, I really believe he saved my life that day, because things weren't going so bad, but I don't think I ever would have left there. I would have just kept trying to work instead of getting out of the ambush. And what it came down to is when they shot our truck, one lucky shot happened to cut the throttle cable. The rest of the truck was fine, but the throttle cable was shot out, so we couldn't go. And so Dave ran back and was like, hey, dude, we got to get out of here. You can't stay here. And I'm like, oh my God, you're right. I got to get out of here. And so then we were able to move out, reconsolidate. We got gun trucks come in. And then once the gun trucks come in, we were able to establish, cordon. Then we were able to get in, get the trucks, clear the rest of the Taliban out, and move on from the day.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It sounds like a little harrowing moment.
It was one of those moments that we got home and we AAR'd it, and everybody looked around and was like, thank God that it was them shooting at us and not the other way around, because if it was us and them, we would have killed them all in 5 minutes. Because we were so we were displaced. We were not doing the right things, you know, and we were very lucky. It was definitely a learning experience, and it was definitely one of those ones you got back there, everybody was like, wow.
Dave and I talked yesterday, and you know, one of my team members on this team has been to Afghanistan, and like Afghanistan has this lull about it. You know, Iraq was a different combat environment, but Afghanistan, you know, in parts of it, it's a beautiful country, and it's quiet, and you're in the country, and sometimes like that lull can, I wouldn't say put you to sleep, right, but can give you this false sense of, man, it's nice, it's peaceful. What was it like to fight that in your head, especially after, you know, you guys got in this engagement, to try to, you know, stay switched on all the time while you're in this, you know, beautiful parts of the country in some aspects?
Yeah, it is hard because especially for a long trip, you're talking a year-long trip to stay switched on like that all the time, and you end up don't, but you have to be able to switch it on quick is what it comes down to. I always remember Mike and I were in an LT ATV driving down south, and we were in this village where there was a lot of bad guys, but everything's nice and quiet and cool. And all of a sudden we start driving into this river, and I hear like a whack, whack, whack. And I'm like, dude, you just blew a tire. And Mike's like, no, I didn't blow a tire. And then I start looking in the water, and I start seeing all the rounds impacting in the water. I'm like, I think they're shooting at us. No, they're not dumb enough to shoot at us. Mike's like, I think they are shooting at us. All right, turn around. You know, so it's one of those things where it's like, you don't get scared about it anymore. You just more get pissed off. Like, no, you're not that stupid to shoot at me, because you know if you shoot at me, we are gonna come and get you. Yeah. And so it's almost in disbelief. Like, no, they're not that stupid. And then every once in a while, they are that stupid.
That's stupid. Could you describe the first time you realized the deployment was going to be particularly challenging and or dangerous? And how did Greg handle situations like that? And how did those actions impact your own?
I mean, I think as soon as you hit the ground, we know we're going to be in a dangerous, long situation. The way that we operate is we were a very aggressive team. You know, we pushed out. We ran our intel as hard as we could to make sure we can find the bad guys and go after them and, you know, do what we needed to do. And because of that, that drives the threat up. Because if you go in there and don't bother people, then people don't bother you as much. But when you go in there and you're shaking your stick everywhere you go, people want to fight you a lot. So it just really had us focusing on doing the basics right all the time. Staying training. Every day that we weren't on a mission, we were training on the range. Every day that we weren't on a mission, we were also planning for the next mission. We were always running the intel. We were always sitting together as a team, getting huddled up, figuring out the plan. What's the next plan? Making sure we're nested in what the hires' needs were. And I think from the perspective that Greg really brought into that was sort of that guy that's been around for a while that could help, you know, give advice here and there, but do it in a way that is not like telling people what to do, but giving advice. And his demeanor and the way he does it just really makes you listen. You know, it's like, I would say him and Mike's personalities are 180 out. Mike is a New Yorker that's like, we're gonna do this, 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 and this, and this is the reasons why. And then Greg would be the guy that would be like, hey man, let's go grab a Diet Coke and a cigarette and let's talk about what we should be doing. And then he would just sort of talk to you about it and like think, and you're like, oh, I get it. He's not like telling you what to do. He's getting you to understand why it is you need to do it, you know?
How was that helpful to you?
Oh, as a young guy, it's huge because the understanding the why is how you grow to be a great operator later, right? Like, if you're just a guy that just gets told what to do and I just do what I'm told, okay, cool, that works when you're a young guy. But as you progress and now you're going to be running the team and all of that, you have to understand the why and making those decisions and what are those second and third order effects of those decisions. And so that mentorship for me was very important because it helped me grow into becoming ultimately a better leader later in my career.
As that deployment's starting to stretch on, you guys are there for a couple months, are you noticing like your level of engagements or your ticks or troops in contact are becoming, you know, more and more or, you know, heavier, I guess, in some aspects?
Yeah, it ramped up. So when we got there, it was like, oh, semi-permissive, like you said, also winter. And then we got into the spring fighting season and things started ramping up. And then We started shaking sticks and going after people. Things started ramping up some more. And then there was some other areas around us that had some stuff going on that we would then go help out with. So yeah, it definitely was a ramp up type of trip.
Did Greg ever talk to you, about him being in that area before and kind of some of the things that had happened to him before?
Yeah, but not like in a lot of detail, honestly. Not with me.
Yeah. Did you ever get the feeling like, hey man, we're in a really bad area, or at that point in the Afghan war was there just fighting going on everywhere? One of the things I didn't know kind of when I was prepping for this, to interview all you guys is how much combat the third group had been involved in.
Yeah.
And you guys, besides Greg, there was 2 other, Green Berets that were lost from your guys' company on that trip.
Yeah.
Did that ever leave an impact on you, like early on in your deployment, or you being the new guy, you were just super focused on the job and just ready to get after it every day?
No, I mean, it definitely has an impact on it, and I think you have to really understand what's going on in the environment, and so that is why we do IPB, why we do that intelligence preparation of the battlefield that you were talking about that Greg did. That was his role, right? Is so that way he can then brief the team. Hey guys, look, this is the historical situation of what we've been here. And he can say it from, hey, I was here in these times and I know this, but just generality, all the intel and all of that. Because you have to have a good understanding of the situation you're in to be able to make sure you're making the right decisions.
I wanted to read something for my audience out there and for the listeners. You're going to hear this story a couple times, but you're one of the things that I wanted to read, and I asked Dovid to give me a copy of was the award that he got for Valor for what happened to that day. I had to pull this out of these guys. This isn't something they generally like to talk about, and nobody asked for an award that day, but I think it's good for our audience and for the American people to hear stuff like this. Staff Sergeant Dovid Berg, United States Army, heroically distinguished himself by exceptionally valorous conduct in the face of the enemy of the United States as the Team Communications Sergeant, Special Operations Task Force West, Herat Province, Afghanistan, and the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. On July 31st, 2012, Sergeant Berg conducted a quick reaction force to support Afghan local police in contact. Operational Detachment Alpha 3424 fought a numerically superior insurgent force in the Kush village. The terrain of the village prevented any vehicles from entering into the area, and the patrol was forced to maneuver by foot at the onset of the engagement. After 2 hours of continuous engagement with the insurgent elements who attempted to overrun an ALP checkpoint, ODA 3424 forced the enemy to break contact from the forward line of the battlefield, enabling the detachment, Afghan National Army, and the ALP to successfully conduct link-up. After a lull in the fighting, the ODA, the ANA, and the ALP conducted a search of nearby compounds and identified several enemy fighting positions. As the order for exfiltration was given, the ODA moved approximately 50 meters from this compound to the east when enemy forces occupying a compound 75 to 100 meters to the southwest engaged friendly forces with heavy small arms, machine gun, and rocket-propelled grenade fire. During this initial enemy volley of fire, one member of the ODA suffered a gunshot wound directly to the head, resulting in an immediate need to break contact from the area and conduct medical evacuation or a Medevac. With enemy fire impacting the wall just behind him, Sergeant Berg returned fire with his M4 carbine and moved forward to link up with his fellow soldiers on the easternmost position at the edge of a mosque to prevent insurgent elements from engaging the ODA from a secondary fighting position. Since the patrol had conducted dismounted maneuver from the ground mobility vehicles 800 meters to the east, the dismounted elements of the ODA had no rigid litter to carry their wounded comrade to the safety other than by individual buddy carry. While the detachment commander and operations sergeant prepared the 9-line Medevac, the assistant detachment commander determined that the best course of action to move their wounded comrade out of the area was to run back to the GMVs and pick up the litter. The assistant detachment commander asked for a volunteer to go with him, and without hesitation, Sergeant Berg volunteered. Sergeant Berg ran the 800 meters through open enemy fields under heavy enemy gunfire to conduct link-up with the other friendly elements. After receiving the litter, Sergeant Berg and his teammate ran another 800 meters back through the village under the enemy fire to the point of injury. Throughout his entire movement to and back from the GMV, Sergeant Berg Sergeant Berg's brave, sporadic harassment fire from the enemy. After conducting link-up with his fellow teammates, he continued to help casualty evacuation and the casualty from the battlefield. Sergeant Berg's unhesitant willingness to retrieve necessary mission equipment with just his fellow comrade enabled the remaining elements of his detachment to successfully move a casualty nearly 1 kilometer to the helicopter landing zone. His actions are in keeping with the finest traditions of military heroism and reflect distinct credit upon himself, the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force Afghanistan, and the U.S. Army. I read that just so you listeners understand that it was those actions that day that Dovid and Mike did that allowed them to get that litter, to put Greg on that litter, and ultimately get him to a helicopter. And it was enough time for him to save him, to get him ultimately to Walter Reed, where his wife was actually able to say goodbye. And that's something that a lot of people on a battlefield, especially when it comes to husbands and wives, get that opportunity. All right, Dovid, so picking up from kind of, we've talked a little bit about a background and kind of what led up to you and kind of where you guys are at and that. Now I'm getting ready to ask you to, kind of relive a tough moment. Can you take us to the night before or kind of the day before? Kind of what were you guys doing up into that evening and then into the morning when this thing happened with Greg?
Yeah, so the thing that happened with Greg really wasn't a pre-planned an event. So I honestly don't really remember the night before anything special other than typically how it always worked is if we weren't on a mission, Mike was setting up a 2-gun stage after dinner. So we'd always have a shooting stage to compete against each other on. And then usually just checking over, all your equipment, making sure all that kind of stuff's squared away for the next day. And then, just hanging out as a team and, being close to each other.
My understanding of what you guys were doing running village stability operations is you guys were starting to have, ALP casualties. It looks like you guys were starting to impact the theater and the area. And that was starting, as you said, to poke the bear for the Taliban. They started, executing members that either of ALP or tribal members that were assisting you guys. And so I'm kind of been talking to Dave. You guys were going out to stay the night at various Afghan checkpoints, to do the true partner force mission and to kind of reassure those guys. And so kind of my understanding of what happened the night before, and maybe you can refresh my memory.
Right.
Yeah,
you guys had stayed out that night. I forgot about that.
Yeah, you guys had stayed out with one of your partner forces.
Yep.
And you guys had kind of almost been up all night, trying to, doing stand to, watch as well as, trying to sleep. But you probably really don't sleep that great when you're in the bush. Waiting to possibly maybe get attacked or whatever. And so, kind of talking to Dave, you guys had really been running almost a 24-hour op in that morning. You guys, Dave had pretty much told us that, your guys' MO at the time is, once the sun comes up and you guys kind of do stand to in the morning and, you guys rip out, go back to the fire base. We
forgot about that. So we went down into the Cushy village at the ALP checkpoint that night. I think there was like 6 of us. And we just stayed in the compound with them. They had been getting a lot of harassing fire and a lot of threats that they were going to be attacked. And so we went in there, stayed all night with them. In the next morning, we left, drove back to our base. And really pretty quickly after we arrived back at our base is when we got the call that now they were under full attack. And so then it was spinning the trucks back up and headed right back out down there.
What kind of information were you getting pushed, or what was your, because everybody has a different view on the battlefield, right? Obviously the team sergeant, team commander are probably getting the information, and you guys are separated by time, space, and distance, and trucks and moving. What kind of information were you aware of that was going on?
So I was also one of the JTACs on the team. So the whole time I was working and making sure we had air overhead and managing the air assets that we were requesting, making sure that we would be able to get something if needed. So that's where a lot of my time was focused on. Once we were able to bring those air assets overhead, then they were still be able to give us that intelligence. So we were getting intelligence coming in from 2 areas. One from our actual ALP that were being attacked, which were calling us on radios, like what's going on. And then finally when we got a Pred overhead, the Pred was able to start saying, hey, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're at. That's when we realized as we started to pull up to the village that where we needed to go, we wouldn't be able to get to in the trucks. So we had to make the call at that point to go ahead and download the trucks, leave gunners and drivers in the trucks. Everybody else was going to go by foot, work ourselves into the village. At that point, I got linked up with Mike. And Mike and I were together, and so we started entering the village. Things were pretty quiet at first, but then as we got sort of a little bit deeper into the village, you could start hearing the gunfire picking up, and then finally now the gunfire started shifting over, and now it was on us. I remember at one point, Mike and I are in a completely open field, walking along, maybe like a meter or two between us. Heavy machine gun fire starts going all over. So we initially hit the ground. We go to start returning fire, and I think I literally have about a 2-inch dirt claw in front of me, and that's all the cover in the world. And at one point, I see a bunch of rounds hit right between Mike and I, and Mike just looks over very calmly and is like, I think it might be time for us to move. I was like, I think you're right.
Yeah. What kind of feedback were you guys getting from the Pred overhead? I mean, what were they telling you, or what could they see?
90 about 90 packs on the ground amongst different compounds, moving from compound to compound, constantly shifting back as we would try to shift in, is what we were getting. And then a lot of times they would just point out where they could see stuff, and so then we would try to move there. It worked out really well. We were able to get a good, strong hold, push them out of the where the ALP was at. And then at that point, we sort of reconsolidated, got everybody back together, and then things got quiet. And so we decided, as we started doing some SSE, we went in and we started realizing that all of the ammo, we started seeing where they were shooting at us, where they were shooting at us from, and all the ammo they were using was U.S. Brazier brass ammo, the ammo that the U.S. gives the ALP.
What was that feeling like?
It was a little bit of vindication, because we had been telling our command for a long time that this was an issue, that you aren't properly vetting these ALP. They're taking that stuff, they're just selling it to the Taliban, and then the Taliban's using it. We even at one point were forced to give some of these ALP machine guns, and we fought against it, because we said we had all this proof that they're just going to use these machine guns against us. So it's a little bit of a weird conundrum when you're out there all by yourself and command's so far away. It's a telephone game, and you got to be able to figure out how to get the truth to those guys to be able to make better decisions. But yeah, so then from there, once we got things sort of cleaned up, we thought, okay, hey, maybe it's time to start to exfil out. It seems like things were quiet. We started exfilling out. We moved about maybe half a click down the village, and as soon as we got there, heavy ambush. Probably 90-degree ambush, RPGs, machine gun fire, very heavy fire. We initially took over a compound. We put our Afghan local police up in the roof with RPGs. I was at the base of the compound. There's maybe a 3-foot-long wall, and Greg was probably 5 feet to my left at the edge of the wall, like where it sort of went down. And then I had another one of my guys over to the right. I just remember it was a very surreal feeling, because we're sitting down here returning fire. You have the smell of gunfire and smoke and all of that, and then you're just hearing RPGs shot overhead outbound, going out, and then 2 minutes later, inbound coming back in, like all right over the top of all of us. It was pretty intense for, at least maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And then at one point, I see Greg go down. And I look over, and Carl was pretty close to him, Carl and the medic. And so they started to go see what was going on with him. Then I get the radio call that, Greg's injured. Carl starts working on him with the medic. He starts working the 9 line. Mike comes over. They look at it. Carl's like, hey, we need to go get equipment out of the truck. So Mike was just like, hey, man, I need a volunteer to go with me to the truck. And I was just right there. So no reason not to go.
What was it like? I mean, you're the JTAC. You have air on station, but you guys are in a kind of a civilian type area. I mean, what was that feeling, man? Knowing that you have this firepower overhead, but you really can't bring it to bear because you have to worry about, civilian casualties and all that type of stuff.
We were, and in this timeline was one of the timelines when the ROEs were super tight. And so there's ways to, I'm going to say this, and then I don't know if you can, we'll talk about if you can take it out later or if it's right then. There's ways to work around the ROEs to do different things. So what I would do is, I would go on there and instead of requesting a predator or a fighter or something like that, because I know that the ROEs are so tight right now, they will not let me drop a bomb. So in reality, I'm gonna have an airplane flying overhead that's doing nothing for me. So what I would always do is I would request AWT, so I would request helicopters, Apaches, because Apaches, the Army looks at Apache helicopter different than the Air Force looks at their aircraft. An Apache helicopter is looked at as its own maneuver element, and it has its own right to self-defense. So I can bring an Apache in low over the team, and if some guy on the ground shoots at that Apache, now that Apache no longer has to go through the ROE channels, it is in self-defense, and now it can attack. And so that's what we were doing that day was I was waiting on trying to get AWT on station so that way we could fight back, because otherwise the aircraft overhead are really just a radio relay.
Were you guys ever get like Apaches on station?
No, not that day we didn't. We ended up getting 2 fast movers. We ended up getting F-16s, and then ultimately when the Medevac birds came in, but still no AWT that day. Yeah.
Where were you, or what do you remember, whether you heard it verbally or whether you heard it on the radio, that Greg had been shot?
It was on the radio. Oh, I saw Greg get shot. I didn't know how bad it was. I went back to work. And then I heard Carl make the call, like, hey, this is what we got to do. I get Mike over here. We got to get this equipment. I saw him and the medic working on Greg, because they're only maybe about 3-4 feet away from me. But yeah, it ramps you up.
Yeah.
And it also makes it, it's a whole nother level of fight in you. I remember, so at that point, it's like, okay, hey, I got with Mike, was like, hey, we got to go back through the ambush, through the village where all the bad dudes are, out to the trucks, grab all this equipment, and we're gonna have to come back. And it was like, speed is safety. So just put our gear on as tight as we could and just started sprinting. And you're still with all your gear the whole time. You're seeing rounds like hitting the ground all behind you, all around us, constantly getting shot at. But I just remember it's that next level of like, this is somebody else's life. You know, that at this point, I cannot slow down, because this is somebody else's life depends on my physical fitness. You know, and I think that's also one of the reasons why, you know, I was so quick to volunteer, because I always drove to be the most physically fit person on the team. Like I was like, because I could never live with the fact that something happened to a teammate because I wasn't physically capable. You know, and so I just remember that day just running almost completely out, like done, not being able to run another foot, but knowing that I had to continue to do that. I just kept telling myself in my head over and over, you got to do this for Greg, you got to do this for Greg, you got to do this for Greg, you cannot stop. You know, and so we just went, grabbed all that. We came back. By the time we got back, I think Mike and I just collapsed on the ground, you know, caught our breath for a minute, got back up, loaded Greg up, and then got right back on it. You know, the whole time I'm talking to the birds, trying to get the helicopters in.
What was that like as you're running back and forth through the truck, man? I mean, there's still stuff popping off all around you and explosions going on. I mean, can you walk us through, you know, as vivid as you can? And I know it's been a long time and it's probably not a place that you visit a lot in your head, but can you kind of walk us on like what was going on around you as you guys are running to and from the truck in an all out, you know, sprint because somebody's life is on the line?
Yeah, you know, the thing I remember the most is our body armor is sort of put together by Velcro. And so now we're in this dead sprint running through this, and I can remember all my body armor pieces are unvelcroing and flying all over the place, and it's just the biggest craziness. Constantly scanning and looking around to try to see where we are getting shot at, so to make sure, hey, you know, we need to go this way or go that way, or just more than anything, picking your running route. All right, hey, I'm gonna go around the side of this tree, I'm gonna go around the side of that thing, so that you're getting a little bit of cover. But what it really was, a sprint. 800 meters, full body armor, guns, shooting back, sprint. And that was our security, speed of security. You know, just hope that we got there so fast that they just didn't have a chance to really hone in and get a good shot on us.
You know,
and
Dave,
we were fortunate.
When we talked to Dave kind of about his recollection, you know, as the team commander of being there and hearing Mike say, I'll go, you immediately saying, hey, I'll go. And in Dave's mind, you guys literally like disappeared and then reappeared moments later. So, you know, it's really interesting to hear the 360 of just how people perceive the events of that day. Mike, you know, you collapse back at the team. You guys are handing off the litter. You then, you take the radio to scream at the Medevac bird. And I'm going to ask you some questions about that in a minute. They won't land. What was it like pleading, for those Medevac birds, knowing Greg's life was slipping away and, these dudes wouldn't land? What's that feeling like?
It was the most heart-sinking feeling I've ever had in my life. Here we are. We have one of our teammates, an American, that's been wounded, and your job is to land a helicopter in a hot environment to save an American, but you're scared and you won't do it? Like, mind-boggling to somebody like me. Like, what do you mean you're not going to land? What do you mean it's not that hot? We're here. We're telling you it's fine. No, it's too hot. I mean, it was probably the most infuriating thing I've ever had happen to me, to the point where, like, I was on the radio screaming at these dudes to land the damn helicopters because we have an American. This isn't an Afghan. This is an American wounded soldier. And they kept just pushing us out. The helicopters stayed so far offset that I got to the point the only way I could talk to them was through the F-16 overhead, because they didn't even want to be in the same valley as us. And then finally, they made us go out another K out into the desert, set up a big area there, and then they landed the helicopters. By this point, I am so upset that I decide I'm going to go have some choice words with the helicopter as they land. And so I go running up to the helicopter as soon as the door opens up. Maybe 5'6" female crew chief gets off, this tiny little girl. I'm going up to this helicopter to go knock somebody out. And this young girl gets off, and I just, okay, get back to reality, go back to work. Yeah. I just turned around and left.
Did you ever get a chance to talk to them later down the road?
No, I said some pretty choice words on the radio to them that I got talked to about later. But no, I don't think they wanted to talk to me after what I had said.
What was that like, man? You guys, get across the field. You've, just endured a gunfight. You've endured the sprint. You've carried your teammate, which, Dave talked about it a little bit of just what that was like physically, almost like some Q course event where, the entire team is just spent as you guys are carrying Greg, his body armor. You guys are all exhausted. You guys didn't really sleep that well the night before. What was that like when you guys finally get him to the LZ and you get him on the bird and you see that bird take off?
We knew it was time to get back to work because we still got a gunfight going on. It's like, this isn't over. And then we had a couple of folks that we had stopped to talk about, to be able to talk to a little bit. And we found one of them had some information on, what was going on. So we started questioning them. And then at that point, once we got all that done, is when Dave decided, okay, hey, cool, let's go ahead and roll back to the fire base. So then we collected everybody up, went back to the fire base, and did an AAR, a really hard, somber AAR.
What was that like?
It was like nothing I've ever done in the military. I've never have been in that situation. It's the only time, fortunately, I was in a situation where I had a teammate killed, on a mission with us. It was. Our AARs are usually very brutal AARs, very brutally honest AARs. And so a mix of that brutalness as well as, the emotional side of, knowing that we just lost a teammate and what went down. It was tough. But the only reason I think that, or the reason, at least for me, that we're able to get through all that is because of the way our team is. Because as we did that, we got it out, we talked it out, and then afterwards we broed it out. We got a chance to just be together, take a deep breath, be there for each other, talk through it for guys that needed to talk through stuff, give guys the space they needed that needed space. But everybody just knew that if you needed something, everybody was there for you.
What's your last memory of Greg living, or your last conversation with him?
Right before we moved from that compound to the compound where he ultimately was shot, when we were at the last compound, I remember he was sitting up on, there was like a mud wall, smoking a cigarette, had his helmet off, his hair was like all up crazy, and he was just telling jokes, just relaxing, telling jokes, being Greg, just easy going and not letting it stress everybody out.
If you could go back to that day, knowing what you know now, what would you have said to Greg?
I definitely would have thanked him. You know, he was a big influence on me, on my leadership style. I mean, I really ultimately followed the same career path that he followed. But yeah, just to thank him, man, for being a good mentor.
There was a lull, like 7 to 8 days, where Greg went from, one cache to another, ultimately got to launch stool, and then got to Walter Reed. What kind of information was getting back to you guys, if you can remember?
Yeah, I mean, I think there wasn't a lot of information to really get back. Like everybody knew realistically where he was at physically, that he was done, but they were keeping him on the system to get his family an opportunity to say goodbye to him. So we all already had known that, he was going to pass. So I think the benefit of it gave us maybe a week or two of time to work through it. It wasn't as sudden. It also gave us some time for me, at least for me, to figure out how to break that news to my wife. Everybody deals with deployments differently with their spouse. When I deploy, I'm not a very talkative person. I don't talk about what we got going on. I try to keep it just talk about fun things, so she has the least amount to worry about as she needs to. But when this went down, it was like, man, I intentionally didn't tell her for a few days because I was like, I don't want her to freak out. But then it got to the point where it's like, okay, this is going to come out. She's going to find out. So it needs to come from me. So I think also during that week was a little bit of sort of trying to figure out, how do I start communicating this to my spouse and my kids in a way that, they understand how serious this is, but also I don't need it to consume their lives. And so.
What was that conversation with you and your spouse? Like, what was that like?
It's probably the hardest conversation I ever had with her about work, because for me, I just never want her to have all of that fear and hold that fear and live with that fear all the time while we're gone. And so it was hard, and I think it was a lot harder for her. And then, for her going to the memorial it was heartbreaking. She just kept saying, if you ever die, I do not want a memorial. There's no way I could do that. She said, I don't know how many times, I don't know how Beth was capable of doing that. She's like, I would just want to be with my mom hiding somewhere. So I think honestly it was probably tougher on her than it was on me, because of the fear and all of that. Whereas we have faith in our capabilities to get us through stuff,
You mentioned you saw Greg get shot. Mm-hmm. I know you didn't probably process it then. There's just too much stuff going on, and there's, in a gunfight, there's all these different things that have to be taken care of, right? So you can get back to wherever you need to. But as you go back and you process that, what's that been like for you?
I honestly don't think about it much. Like the actual impact, like seeing it happen. I honestly don't think about it much. And honestly, really, when I think back to that day and those times, I truly believe that was that 1 in a million bullet. That it wasn't even aimed at him. It just happened to get there and just happened to hit the way it hit. I try to really just focus on all the good things, and the relationships that have come out of it, and, how tight our team is. I think probably because of that is what I really try to focus on.
Thank you for that. August 8th hits, and the call come. Greg's gone. Where were you when you heard that? How did it land with you, both of you personally, but also for the team as a unit?
Yeah, we were in our talk when they called and finally let us know. I think it was one of those things that we had all, because we had that sort of time knowing that it was going to happen. It wasn't like a surprise. We were able to already sort of work through it. For the most part, he was already dead. So it wasn't like a really crazy day. I think we had already worked through things for the most part. Really, then it just became planning, because we were gonna be doing. They wanted to take our whole team up to the headquarters to do a memorial, so we were getting that done, and then just all the other stuff that was going on, the investigation, still got operations going, still got all of our work has to go on. Now you're throwing in all this, we got to travel to go to this memorial. So it's just making things more hectic.
How was the memorial?
It was good. I mean, it was good. I think it was the right thing to do. I think you have to do something like that to sort of put a nail into that, and then be able to go back to work. So I think it was good for our team to do it. It was somber, but it wasn't as somber as like the real memorial, So yeah, I don't know.
The team rallied to finish the deployment. I mean, you guys did 10 months total, and I think that's something, I hammered it with Dave. I'll probably hammer it as I talk to all of, the guys from this team, but like life doesn't stop, war doesn't stop.
Yeah.
And, there's still, you have a limited amount to time really to process that before you got to stuff it in a box and go back to doing the thing, right? And, how was that after Greg's gone and you guys have to go back to work and you guys have to do the thing that you guys were there to do? Did it change kind of the tone of the deployment for you guys?
It changed the tone, but not like greatly. I would say, hey, guys are now a little bit more motivated to get out there and go kill bad guys. It's like now you're pissed off. I would also say that guys are a little bit more hesitant. They're maybe not hesitant, but more willing to do a little extra planning. How can we buy down the risk a little bit more? Because now it's real, right? Like when you've been running around and bullets are whipping by your head all the time and nothing ever happens to you, you're like, nothing can happen to me. But then when something happens, then it's like, oh, something can happen to me. So then you just have to, be a little bit more diligent about some of your planning.
How did Greg's absence change you on the ground? Did his voice still echo in your head, guiding you to fight smarter, not harder?
I wouldn't say a voice in my head, but I would say that we would talk a lot about Greg, and especially like Tim and I and Bart, we tend to hang out, and Tim had his own little house. And so we would talk about it in there, and I think it also brought some of us a little bit closer, especially guys like Tim and Bart were probably the closest to with Greg. And I think that, brought some of us closer to them because of that.
How did you and the team support each other emotionally and mentally through the remainder of the deployment following Greg's loss?
Just picking on each other. You know how Green Berets do that. There wasn't nobody giving hugs out. It was more like ass slaps and just treating them the same way you always treated them. Yeah. But I think everybody knew, like, if you needed somebody to talk to, or maybe you needed to slide away and have a beer with a buddy and just relax for a little bit, we would do that. But yeah, we're not the most huggy, touchy guys.
We talked with the Command Sergeant Major from 1st Special Forces Command and kind of some of the programs that are available now that I don't think were available then. Kind of keeping that in mind, like looking back now, what helped you the most in dealing with the trauma of losing a close teammate like Greg, and what do you wish had been available to you and your team at that time, if anything, man?
I think it's such an individual thing. For me, I don't believe in psychologists or psychiatrists or any of those folks. Everyone I've ever met, their life is just shambles. And I don't believe in somebody that doesn't know me, like truly know me. How can you give me advice? You don't know me. For me, I'm very fortunate that I have my wife. My wife and I have been together for 24 years. I'd say this all the time, and I swear to God, this is the truth. If it wasn't for my wife, I would be dead or in jail. Guaranteed. She is definitely the compass of my life, and so through her is really how I worked through things. I had no desire to have any need or request of the government to help me out in any way. but it's an individual thing, you know. So I think that if there are guys that do need to see professional help, and we should make sure that that's available to them. And luckily, there's a lot of opportunities now that there wasn't, like you said, back then. They did force all of us to go see the group psychologist for one day, and like the consensus that came out of it was events like Greg's events isn't what causes PTSD, at least on our team. It's all the administrative crap that you're trying to force down our throat that's going to cause PTSD. You know, it's like we can handle that. We don't want to handle that.
Yeah, oh, makes sense. Greg was the mentor on the team. You know, he didn't bark orders. You've said that. He kind of just led by example. If you could sit with him one more time, cigarette dangling out of his mouth as he's singing Britney Spears or something in the background, what would you thank him for?
I thank him just for being such a good person. You know, he was just there to help. You know, you didn't have to ask for help. He was always going to be there to help. He was always going to be there to bring a smile to everybody's face. He was always going to be there to sort of be the glue that holds the thing together. He would always be that guy that would make things work from the personality standpoint. You know, it's like we can get the work stuff done, but to get everybody like feeling good and in the right mindset and in a good mood, like that's what he was great at.
ODA 3424 still talks more than any team that you've been on or were on after, even after a decade. Why do you think Greg's loss forged such an unbreakable bond, and what does that brotherhood still mean to you now?
I think it's a blend of the loss of Greg, and then we had a really good team that really got along. Like once we got rid of a couple of the crazy ones, like the rest of the team really gets along and likes to hang out, likes to see each other. Every time I'm in Tampa, if I'm like, Dave, you around? Heck yeah, man. I had to go to a trip for Israel, do some work. First person I call was Mike. Like, hey, Mike, I know you're not working. You want to come to Vegas? You want to come to Israel with me? He's like, yeah, come on, let's go. You know, like not even thinking about it. It's truly a brotherhood. And I think that's what's kept the longevity. I think anytime you go through traumatic experience, it's going to also make that tighter. But that's a little bit about what being on a team is, you know? It's like you struggle together, and because of that, all of that struggle together, you build these deep bonds together. And I think the Greg incident probably just added to that. But I believe in my heart that even if Greg was still here today, that our team would still be as equally tight.
That's awesome. You keep Greg's bracelet and the photo on, you know, the photo of him on your desk. I remember when we were, you know, prepping for this, you showed me that photo. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like your daily reminder. Looking back, what's, you know, one moment from that day that haunts you the most, and what's one that fills you with pride?
I would say one moment that haunts me the most was after we loaded Greg onto stretcher, and he was on the bird and out. Somebody pointed out some Taliban member that we had captured that had some information on who these guys were, and maybe in a fit of rage, I didn't treat that guy with the most respect I should have. And I look back on that and I think I should have been a better person than that. Something that I would say I bring a lot of pride out in is seeing our team in a tough time come together to do the right thing, to do everything that we could to try to save a teammate. And then, though that wasn't successful, being able to come back to the fire base as a team together and be there for each other. That's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that, Dovid.
You know, for our audience, there's a lot of folks in our audience that are in the military. Civilians, a lot of them are just never no combat, thank God, right? What do you want them to feel about Greg's sacrifice and your run through that village? And how do you hope this story honors Greg?
I always want Greg to be remembered for the person he was, not for this necessarily this one little thing, right? This was 1 hour of a 40-year life. And there was so much great things that Greg did for so many people. He was such an inspiration, such a mentor, that's what I want to drive on. That's why when I heard about this, I was really excited about getting involved. That's why I keep Greg's picture on my desk every day. It's because that legacy of mentorship, of friendship, of just being a good teammate is so important. And I want to make sure that drives on. And that's why every year I do a workout at a gym named after Greg. And I talk about that, and I talk about what I really focus on is less on how he got killed, but more on who he was and what a great teammate he was.
Thanks for that. If you could freeze one frame from July 31st of 2012 for this podcast, what is it? Greg laughing before the patrol, the sprint through the village, the bird lifting off. And why would you pick that moment?
For me, from that day, it's a different moment. Honestly, the moment that just always is joyful or whatever, is that moment I was talking about where of all places, I'm in a completely flat as flat can be open area, getting shot at by machine guns, laying on the ground, trying to get behind an anthole, and then Mike, as calm as can be, is just like, "Hey, bro, I think it might be time we move." And I was like, God, you are right.
It is funny how our brain holds on to those certain things and those certain moments and those traumatic events too. Yeah. You've said Greg's loss taught you a lot of resilience through war. How do you see him and the man you are today? You run a consulting firm and you're helping vets heal.
Yeah, I think I took a lot from him from the mentorship side of just trying to grow great interpersonal relationships. People are so much more willing to help you and allow you to help them when they trust you and when you have great rapport and when you're not an asshole, you're just the dude that's out there that's trying to help. And so I really try to drive a lot of that into my personality, especially as I became more of a leader in Special Forces. There's different kinds of leaders. There's those more dictating leaders, there's those micromanaging leaders, and then there's that leader that can just give you the intent and some mentorship and let you run. And that's what he was, and that's what I strove to become.
That's awesome. We're telling Greg's story through your eyes, Dovid. What's the one truth about him, his heart, his grit, his spirit, that you want etched in this podcast for forever?
I would say that the one thing I want remembered about Greg was that no matter what the situation was, he was always able to find the silver lining of the cloud and then get everybody else to see it.
Yeah, thanks for that. What do you believe is Greg's lasting legacy within your team, the Special Forces community, and for you personally in your own life?
I think it's that mentorship role. I think it's letting guys learn and understand that even in Special Forces, you don't have to be super crazy hard ass. You can just be a good human being that cares about others, that is proficient at what your job is, and everything else will follow suit.
One thing I've as we prep for this and then just talking to you, your family is super important to you, and that's something that I resonate with as well. You have a wife that obviously you're super close to. I know you're close with your kids. If you could speak directly to Greg's family, what would you want them to know about his impact on you and those who served alongside him?
Yeah, I think his impact is he saved my life numerous times while we were out there, not necessarily physically, but through mental preparation, helping me understand how to do my job properly. And then as I went farther into my career, being able to be as an intel guy, I definitely learned a lot from him there. But what it comes down to it's those interpersonal skills that he brought to the table that just everybody gravitated towards him, and that was something I truly looked up to. Is he was the guy on the team that everybody wanted to hang out with, because he was fun. And then guess what? When we get on the range, he could take care of that too. He could take care of that too. But he was fun. He was easy to talk to. He would never be demeaning. He was just a good person. Thanks for sharing that, brother.
What do you? One of the things, and kind of getting this story is, and why I fell in love with it, and I think I said this on Dave's as well, is man, your team is like the ultimate group of quiet professionals. You know, even when we first started this story, I kind of had to, I wouldn't say beat you guys out of it because that's not a true representation, but you know, man, I really had to kind of sell the idea, not because you guys didn't care about Greg, but this is kind of something that you guys as a team kind of held close hold because of your bond as a team, because of who Greg meant to you guys personally. You know, what was it about this podcast that you agreed to come out of the shadows and relive this worst day, you know, in front of the world, really?
Greg's legacy. That's the number one priority to me, is for him to never be forgotten. He put his life on the line and ultimately gave his life for us, for America, but really for us, you know? And so somebody that's done something of that magnitude for me, anything I can do to make sure that his legacy continues on is equally important.
That's a great point, right? And I think sometimes that's maybe a little bit lost on the American people. You know, a lot of us joined the military, myself included, you know, for the greater good. I won't say we didn't. Some of us had our own personal reasons. But when you're in a war zone, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, wherever, man, and the bullets start flying, it really is about that dude on your left or, you know, that chick on your right, if, you know, you have that in your unit. And politics don't matter. Race, color, creed, you know, it's really, hey, bro, are you going to shoot back when they shoot at us? You know, and I think your team was the epitome of not only shooting back, but doing everything you guys could that day to save Greg and really give, you know, Greg's family the opportunity to say goodbye, which is something, again, man, a lot of people just never got the opportunity to. Yeah. So on behalf of, you know, me and my staff, we just wanted to thank you. Thank you for your courage. Personally for me, you know, I've gotten to know you through this process. Thank you for being willing to have this conversation to relive the worst day in your life so that the audience can hear and that Greg's memory and really his celebration of life, right? Because I don't like saying, you know, it says, you know, this topic's heavy, but it really is a celebration of Greg and people like Greg, right? That makes, you know, this country great, that makes our military, the military that we are, the most lethal fighting force because of, you know, the courage, grit, determination, and all those things that your team represented. And really, you guys are an awesome representation of the regiment. So thank you for telling your story, man. And I know we've kind of talked offline, you know, there's a podcast coming out down the road that's going to be, you know, just focused on you because your story is amazing. So I'm excited to have that as well, man. So again, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And if there's anything I can ever do to help, please let me know.
Awesome. Hey, all you guys, man, stay safe out there. And if you can't be safe, be violent out here.